There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Kohberger.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, when we cover the Idaho Quadruple case, and of course, I don't like to call it that, but for titling reasons, I do. Of course, the victims of that, Ethan Chapin, Zaina Knodel, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves. Most of us, or most of the people out there that follow this case, we don't think of the victims. It's become, the media has made this somewhat a bit of a circus. And people think of Brian Kohberger. And again, I'll say it a million times, he's innocent until proven guilty. However, people are more focused on him. And we lose sight of the victims of these crimes. 4 students, 2 20-year-olds and 2 21-year-olds. Snuffed out at the prime. They didn't even reach the prime of their life. Too early. They were kids, literally kids. And you know, 20-year-old to 21-year-old, young man, young woman. But those of us who are parents, we think of people that age as kids, especially we have our own kids. And we have to think of them and their families more than, you hear the media praising, Brian Kohberger, the master criminal. He's not a master criminal, first of all. And I think that we cannot lose sight of the victims. That's what this case really is about. And what it's really about is to honoring their memory. And the other thing is of course, understanding and coping with the grief. And no one in this case that I have seen has shown more class and more just strength and positivity than the mother of Ethan Chapin. Her name is Stacy Chapin, and her husband Jim. They have personified great people, great family. And having said that, I could not be like them. I praise them, I admire them, I honor them, but I don't have the personality to be them or to be like them. This happened to someone in my family, I'm thinking of one thing, and it's a guy named Hammurabi and his code. And I'm thinking an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and I want vengeance and I want payback. But do you think that's healthy for the individual to feel like that, or is it healthier to feel the way that Stacy Chapin does and her husband Jim? You think she'll heal faster? You think she'll be able to never lose the memory of her son Ethan, but maybe go about her life better? Because I think that when you do have that mentality, like I do, unfortunately, of vengeance and making the person that did this pay for it, it's a different mentality. And I'm sorry, I can't be like Stacy Chapin. And even though as I said, I admire her, and I think she's unbelievable. Her family's unbelievable. And don't forget, she has 2 other children. Ethan Chapin was a triplet, which makes this even more painful for his siblings. His siblings are Maisie and Hunter, his brother. His sister Maisie and his brother Hunter. So triplets. And as a mother, as Stacy Chapin, don't you think she's always keeping her eye on her triplets? On the 2 survivors? How are they doing? Because you would expect them not to be doing too well. The loss, they say twins, when one feels pain, they could be hundreds of miles away. The other one feels pain too. So I can imagine triplets, it's probably even more true with them. I'm not going to try to tackle this topic, which I am not an expert in, by myself. And by doing that, I brought a great guest today, and she's been on the show once before. And her name is Anna Markelin, and she has her own podcast called The Badass Confidence Coach. So I'm going to bring on Anna right now, and we're going to introduce her to you guys and to the rest of our audience. Anna, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, Anna, you heard my opening monologue, and I don't know what your personality is in regards to something like this, in regards to grief, in regards to how you handle something like this. But speaking from a professional, you could probably reiterate what I just said, and probably Stacy Chapin's way of dealing with it is healthier than my way of dealing with it.
Well, I don't think that there's one way that's healthier than another. Not really. When you're going through something like this, whenever anybody is experiencing a loss as great as this, there are no expectations, and there ought to be no expectations of friends and family members on each other as to how you are dealing with grief or how you are coping. Now, of course, no, we don't want you to go out and get revenge and, commit a crime. Of course, that's a non-negotiable. But when it comes to our emotions and when it comes to our feelings, our thoughts, how we cope is how we cope. And no judgment towards anybody for how they're dealing with their grief.
No, I don't really sort of mean judgment, but when I see people like Stacy Chapin, I really admire her and how she has chosen to deal with this, because it is a choice. But I acknowledge I could not do that myself, because I don't have that personality type where I could. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know that I could have either. I watched her on the Today Show this morning as well. And, you can't watch it. I think that Savannah Guthrie, the interviewer, looked like she was choking up a little bit. Her voice was a little hoarse. I wondered if it was hard for her. She has children. I watched it. I was tears coming down my face. I mean, I don't know how. I was in awe as well. I sat there and I thought how she flew to New York. She's on this morning program. She wrote this wonderful book about Ethan to keep his memory alive, a Little Boy in Blue, or The Boy Wears Blue, about the T-shirt. That's how they distinguished him from his brother when they were babies, because they put them in color-coded clothes, and he was the little one who wore blue. And I'm just like crying but that is how she is dealing, that she got energized. We talked about this in the last podcast I was on with you, Police Off the Cuff, about something like this can be energizing for certain individuals, and that's what they need to do. That's their personality, is to get out there and to do something with it. Whereas if it was me, I think it'd be a big deal for me to sit up in bed 6 months later,
Yeah. Anna, I'm going to play a little bit of that Good Morning America interview, because you're right. It's hard to watch. It's, you can't even imagine what these people are going through and have gone through even 6 months later to get to this point. So let's play a little bit of this here.
They are also finding touching ways to remember and honor their loved ones. In a moment, we're going to talk to Ethan Chapin's mom, Stacy. But first, a closer look at the case and their tributes. More than 6 months have passed since the murders at King Road, when Ethan Chapin, his girlfriend Xana Kernodle, and best friends Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves were found stabbed to death in this house near the University of Idaho campus. A tense manhunt and weeks of painful waiting for the victims' families followed before police arrested their suspect in late December. Brian Kohberger was pursuing his PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University, just miles from the scene of the murders. Investigators say DNA evidence, cell phone records, and video surveillance link him to the scene that night. Kohberger's trial is set for October, the judge entering a plea of not guilty for the 4 murders after Kohberger declined to enter one himself. Ethan Chapin's family has watched from afar while holding close their memories of a beloved son and brother.
He loved everybody and everybody loved him. Everybody wanted to be around him.
Ethan's parents, Stacy and Jim Chapin, are honoring him through a foundation named Ethan's Smile. It gives scholarships to local students to attend the University of Idaho.
That kid has touched more lives. We say in our family, if we touch as many lives as he did in his 20 years, this world would be a better place.
Ethan was a triplet. His two siblings still attend the university. This May, graduation ceremonies were bittersweet as the school awarded Ethan a posthumous certificate. And now, Stacy Chapin has written a children's book about Ethan called The Boy Who Wore Blue. A portion of the profits will also go to the foundation, Ethan's Smile. Okay. And Stacy Chapin joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's hard to watch those images of your beloved boy. How are you doing?
It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's good though. I mean, all things considered, we're doing very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a triplet. He has a brother and sister. How are they doing?
Jim and I couldn't be more proud of them, to be honest with you. They went back to school. They finished successfully.
You know, I've always noticed throughout my life that positive people always put a positive spin even on negative things. And she just did that. And
She did.
It's a skill. And I remember I did security years ago for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he was super positive like that too. And anything negative, he would turn it around into a positive. And I was like, in my mind, when he did that, I was like, that's his athletic training. That's teaching never to get down on yourself, always to be positive. And she did the same exact thing.
I think that for some people, there is a wiring towards positivity, a positive psychology. I think that is something that may be in their genes or genetics. And I know that it can be taught. I know that when we come from a more of a pessimistic mindset, that is something that we can learn, we can change, and we can become more positive by being more intentional and making a decision to think in a more positive way. Not in like a fake toxic positivity way, but that we can really flip the script on that and think in a more positive way. And that's exactly what Stacy has done. Now, do I think that she tends to be one who just is born with a positive mindset? Yes, probably. They sound like a wonderful, happy, just good people, really. And, you see that evidenced in her son. You see it evidenced in she and her husband. As you could just get that energy, that vibe off of them. But for those who, that's not where they come from. That's not their norm. This would be something that one could work on. But in talking about grief, I have no expectations. If you want to be down and depressed and negative and sad because that's your grieving, you go ahead and do it. And nobody can tell you to stop it.
No, you're 100% right. And you know what, just to mention something, and this isn't a feel-good show, but I just like to mention this, is that conversely, being around negative people can also make you think negatively and become negative.
Absolutely.
And that's why, whether it's someone in your family or friend, if they're toxic, you get the hell away from them, because they will destroy your life. And that happens to be a fact. So positive people can make you positive. Negative people can make you negative, so you got to pick your choice. What do you want to be, positive or negative,
Right. It's contagious. I mean, I remember I worked interestingly, I worked in a psychology department, one of my first jobs out of graduate school, and there was a lot of negativity within that department. And I'm, a little embarrassed to say, but I'm human too, almost 30 years later, that it affected me. It affected my attitude at work. It affected the way I treated people. And it was like this nasty, negative contagion that went through the department. And I never thought of myself really as being someone who was negative towards others, but it got to me. I knew I needed to get out of there. So there you go.
Well, we joke about that among cops, and cops are overall positive people. However, when you're around a lot of negativity, you get the guys going, this job sucks, that sucks, something. Right. I had to come in and pick up my paycheck. And you're like, dude, are you kidding me? Shut up, like after a while. But it was funny, but it's also, you realize where it's coming from. People have to vent too. And especially as a cop, you see horrible things and you want to vent. And usually who you vent at is the organization that you work for. Let's blame them. It's not my fault. It's their
Right.
fault,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had my colleague tell me, she said, you gotta stop being so negative. And it really was a wake up call. I didn't like her saying that to me. I thought, at the time, who are you to talk to me that way? Because she was my junior. She wasn't wrong in it. And I never forgot it, because here I am almost 30 years later on your podcast talking about it. It was a paradigm shift in thinking for me to be more positive and to get out of that negative, toxic culture. So.
Yeah, and sometimes, you have those, and I sort of hate this expression, but it makes sense with people, those aha moments.
Right.
Aha,
Yeah,
and
it was.
yeah, it was an aha moment. Let me play a little
Sure
more
was.
Stacey Chapin here.
Yeah.
This semester. And now they're back at work in a place that they love, and we've called summer home for a long time. So they're in a safe, great environment, and they're doing amazing. I'm so proud of them. It's amazing.
I think people are about to find out what an extraordinary family you have, Stacey, and what an extraordinary boy Ethan was. You've written this book. It's called The Boy Who Wore Blue.
Yes.
Tell me about writing it and what made you decide to write this story?
It started with my best friend sent me a news release that was that an author had been given the rights to the story to tell of these kids. And I, as a mom, you're like, well, how does somebody write a story about people that they don't know, right? Right, about my kid. Yeah, I'm the one who's raised him, Gemini. And it just sparked something in me. And the only thing I can explain to people how the book came about is I think it's like a country artist who goes through a breakup and writes their greatest hit. It literally just came to me in the middle of the night.
It's Ethan's song.
It's everything. Yeah, it's the best I can do for him.
I love The Boy Who Wore Blue. You had triplets, and you learn in the book that when they were little, they used to each wear a color.
They did.
And that's how you told them apart when they were babies. And he was the one who wore blue.
He was the blue.
He was a very special young man. Everybody says it. Tell me about him.
Yeah. He was that way from the very beginning, to be honest. He was born happy. He was just magnanimous, kind of. I don't know really how to explain it. What we find more interesting is how many lives he touched that we didn't even know existed. It's incredible. I mean, I tell people if I touch as many lives in my lifetime as he did in 20 years, he just swarmed to every room. He had a wonderful smile.
You hear in those stories now, people are calling you and saying, I remember when Ethan did this or that.
Yes, or strangers.
Yeah.
The strangers have been amazing who have come up to us, and it always started the same way. You don't know me, but I have this story to tell you. Yeah.
What does that do for you? Is it comforting? Is it hard to kind of share your grief with this high profile story and it's so public?
We learned our family has always tried to help everybody. And we came upon the Sigma Chi boys the morning after. And in that moment, we realized that not only, that it wasn't just, our family healed one way, but everybody needed to heal from this. And we saw it in an instant, kind of seeing all of his friends. And it's just gone from there. It's literally, we've been reached by people across the world. And it just, we can see that everybody needs to heal from it. And it feels good.
You have.
Again, amazing woman, amazing family. And I'm really amazed at how she's dealt with this. It's very brave. And I think mental health wise, again, and I'm not, I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I'm not a mental health professional. And I think probably the way that she's chosen to deal with this is healthier than maybe, vengeance is mine. And I'm not putting that down because that would be me. That would absolutely be me. She later on in this interview, she's asked if she's going to attend the trial.
Right.
And she said, absolutely not. That won't do any good for me. She goes, it's not going to help. It's not going to bring him back. But Steve Gonsalves, the father
Right.
of Kaylee
Kaylee.
Gonsalves,
Yeah.
he wants to be there every single day. And I would never put him down for that.
Sure.
He's dealing with
Sure.
this the best he can. And he has to be there. There's something in, and I would too. If this was me, I would be the Steve Gonsalves. I would not be Stacy Chapin. I would, that's just my personality.
Yeah.
And again, I admire her, but she's not me, you know.
Right. And I think that what you see in the difference between Steve Gonsalves and Stacy Chapin are two different ways of coping with tragedy and grief. You know, Steve can't do anything different. There's no other option from him. I heard his Kaylee's older sister, I think she just had a baby in the past several months. And I often think of her, and I think of her grief and her being pregnant. And I just think of that whole family. And her older sister said, I will be there every day of that trial. And that whole family, I think, Lisa's sister and the mom and dad will be there every day. That's what they need to do. That's what they need to do. That's a part of their grieving process. For them, they couldn't even fathom not being there. They need to do that. That's how they're going to keep their sister and their daughter's memory alive. Stacey chose the route because that's what she needs to do. Is she needed to write this book. It came to her at night, and she wrote it. She was energized to write it, and that's how she's coping. That's how she's dealing with her grief. The grief is no different. It's probably in many ways no different for these two families, but how they're choosing to cope with it is unto themselves. It's per each individual.
100%. Folks, this is a little file tape of Steve Gonsalves appearing on Good Morning America. And this is before Brian Kohberger was arrested. So let's hear what he has to say.
The father of one of the victims, 21-year-old Kaylee, now shedding new light on what happened that night in his first sit-down interview.
It was fast, and nobody suffered and nobody felt like that kind of pain.
Two other roommates survived on the ground floor, waking up several hours later, calling friends over when their roommates were unresponsive.
Do you know the reason why the initial concern was that a roommate was passed out?
I know the girls reached out via texting and calling, so I can only assume that by the phones being ignored, knowing how my daughter is not going to ignore calls and texting.
Officials maintain the murders happened between 3 and 4 a.m. and that the first 911 call was made around noon. Just hours later, Steve was informed of his daughter's death, not by police, but by family members on campus.
Let's call Maddie. And then you realize Maddie's gone too.
Madison Mogan was Kaylee's lifelong best friend. The pair seen together in their final hours of life, laughing and ordering late-night food before getting a ride home together in what Steve described as a sorority-designated driver service.
You can't imagine sending your girl to college and then they come back in an urn.
And now, the families of the victims growing frustrated by the lack of answers.
I haven't earned the ability to grieve the way that I want to grieve. I want to be able to have justice first.
See, totally different than the Stacy Chapin school of grieving. And that's me. I'm Steve Gonsalves. That's who I would be. But we also realize this file tape we're watching now was very raw. It was when it first occurred. Brian Kohberger wasn't arrested yet. They didn't know anything really about the case. They had all kinds of questions and basically no answers. But he is definitely handling it in a much different way. But again, the way maybe most people would handle it. I think Stacy Chapin is a minority in how she handles it as compared to, I think, how most people would handle it.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I was on your podcast before. I think that for many people, this can be energizing, and that's how they deal with their grief, is to take action. And at that point, yes, looking for answers, looking for some sort of resolve. That has to get done first inside their mind and inside their heart. And I don't know Steve Gonsalves. I will say I'm going to put this out there, disclaimer, that I'm not going to purport to know how people, this is so unique. I've done a lot of grief and loss counseling throughout my life, from parents of infants, and I spent years in my later years working in oncology with cancer patients. And I never assume to know what people are feeling, what they're thinking, even as we watch, Stacey on TV and Steve Gonsalves on TV. So I need to say that because it's so individual. The only thing that comes up for me in watching this with him is that he's energized. And I think that for some of us, we can't grieve until this is put to rest, until the cameras are gone, the trial is over, we're done with it. We know who did it. There's maybe a guilty verdict. And okay, now I go home, and now I can maybe sit with myself and feel this, because what is very difficult is that in the stillness of the night at 3 a.m., when you're alone and there's quiet, there's where the grief is. That's when it comes up. And I would probably guess that everybody who's affected by this tragedy has had those 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, total despair and bereftness of their sadness and of their grief. And that's why I think it's so important, anytime there's a loss, to try not to do it alone, to try to reach out to family and friends, go to a support group. Those people have been there. They've been in the trenches with you. They know what it's like. Go to a grief support group of moms who've lost children or dads who've lost children. Go get specific. Go see a therapist. Go see a grief counselor who knows this stuff. This is their specialty. Because I don't think we do grief alone. We don't do grief alone. We need that help.
Anna, when I was a sergeant in homicide, I had this really sort of a horrible experience. Myself and a detective, we had to go and notify this woman that her 21-year-old son was dead, that he had just been shot and he was dead. And we walked into the apartment, and the woman spoke no English. And so we stood there like two dopes. My partner spoke pidgin Spanish, a little tiny bit. And somehow we communicated to her in the worst way. But it was like as soon as she understood that her son was dead, we became the enemy.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the way that felt. It was almost like we were the Grim Reaper. How dare us deliver this horrible news to her, And I understood it from a human point of view, but being a human being, I didn't like the way it made me feel. But we walked out of there, and I was just like, wow.
It could have been
the messenger got killed,
Yeah, kill the messenger, a projection of her shock and her anger and her disbelief at that point, or scapegoating the two of you. It's a defense mechanism that we go to. It's primal. It's not something she even thought about. It's just this primal reaction to what information was coming into her, and you were on the receiving end of that. So yeah, it's important to have some sense of, okay, this is so not about me. This is about.
No, I understood it. I still didn't like it. You know what I mean? It wasn't a positive experience to go through, but I totally understood it. But we even offered to give her and her I think it was the boy's uncle a ride to the hospital, and they wanted no part of us. We were death. We were death to her. You know what I mean?
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. That was my.
I would venture to guess, if you talked to that woman today, she would not even remember that.
Probably
She went
not.
into
You're
some-
right.
She went into some sort of, fugue state where she wouldn't even remember that. I have no memory,
I
because
think
that's
you're
what
right.
happens, right? Yeah.
This is early on in the when it first occurred.
At all intimidating, I must say. And I didn't write any of the funny stories that we talked about. That is service. But I would like to start by saying my name is Stacy Chapin. I'm Ethan's mom. I'm here tonight with my husband, Jim, Ethan's dad, and his brother, Hunter, and his sister, Maisie, who are also vandals. I think you knew he was a triplet, and that they all go here as well. Okay. We want to start by extending
Wow, even getting through that was is incredible.
our deepest condolences to all the families impacted by this tragedy. It's hard that we are without these 4 beautiful kids with us tonight. We're here tonight because the University of Idaho is a special place for our family personally. Our triplets enrolled here together because of the small town feel, the beautiful campus, and the Greek system. Those were all mandatory must-haves when picking a school. We visited a neighboring college. No offense if there's any cougs here. And it felt big and logistically challenging to our family. However, when we arrived on this campus, parked, got out, we all agreed, yes, this school is perfect for us. It feels right. The people here were kind and welcoming when we showed up for orientation, and we knew as a family that we'd made the right choice. The circumstances that bring us here tonight, they're terrible. The hardest part, we cannot change the outcome. And as a family, as a Chapin family, it's important that we share Ethan's legacy and talk about the impact that he made in his young 20 years or his short 20 years. So this is where we choose to focus our energy because we are now Ethan's voice. What I want you to know is that our family is no different than probably all of your families. We sat at the dinner table when time permitted. We played games together. We traveled. We hauled our kids to every sporting event imaginable. We had cribbage tournaments, pickleball competitions, and basketball shooting contests. We surfed and spent countless hours in our boat listening to country music, which was Ethan's most favorite thing in the whole world. We hiked. Typically, the kids did that reluctantly.
I'd now like to invite Kaylee Gonçalves' father, Steve Gonçalves, to the stage. Just so I can let everybody know, the main reason I'm up here today is so that everybody can understand what we lost. I hope to be able to make you laugh, but I'm afraid we're gonna have to cry because we lost 4 beautiful souls. And the 2 that I'm up here to talk about are the ones I knew. And when I started thinking about how I was going to tell these people what their souls were like. And
I just think that if I can make a comment here, is that with all we've learned about this case, I don't think anyone remembers this. And this was the memorial service at the University of Idaho shortly thereafter. And I think this is important to acknowledge more than the sensationalism that many have made this case, and to remember, as we always do, that there were real people behind this. Ethan Chapin, Zena Canodal, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonçalves. They are real people.
the things that they shared with me,
Yeah.
I started thinking that this is going to be really tough. So I did what you guys do. I Googled it. I went in and I looked for the most beautiful things in the world. I looked for some kind of inspiration. I knew I should have took creative writing a lot more serious because I was in trouble. But I came up with the 7 wonders of the world, and I seen them and I looked at them for inspiration. And I prayed to my girls and I said, "You're gonna have to help me here. I'm struggling." And they just came to me and they told me there should be another wonder in the world. I said, "All right, help me here." And they said, "It's the wonder of the relationship of a father and his daughter." I said, "All right, that is pretty wonderful." You start wondering the minute they put that baby in your hand, you wonder what you're going to do. And you wonder how you're going to feed them and how you're going to take care of them. And then you wonder why your wife's yelling at you because you're feeding your baby a hamburger. You know, it's like, and then you wonder, how am I going to understand and make this the best opportunity for both of us? And you start seeing the world through the girl's eyes. And as a father, it's a little bit scary. You start seeing like the world starts having like this purple haze, and there's puppies and there's kitties and there's all these weird movies you have to watch, and they start crying all the time.
Again, amazing, and just the difference in how different people grieve and how different people express themselves. But he was no less fantastic
No.
than Stacy Chapin. I think he did a fantastic job too.
He did. Yeah, he really he's keeping her memory alive.
Absolutely. And it's like, this is something that, again, we get lost in this case. Gag orders, DNA, K-bar knives, DNA on the knife sheath, video of the Hyundai Elantra pulling into the behind the house, the cell phone pinging on cell sites, the autopsies which have never ever been made public, the brutalness of this quadruple murder. And again, we forget the human beings involved in this, and it becomes sensational. And in a way, like, I think Stacy Chapin, she said, someone was writing a book about my son. He doesn't even know my son. And I know she hit it right on the head. And there actually are 2 authors now writing a book about the Idaho murders. One of them is a famous author named James Patterson, and another one is a New York Times and a former Vanity Fair writer named Howard Bloom, who we did a whole show on because we were displeased in how he was portraying the police in this case.
Right.
And
I heard that one.
typical elitist, that doesn't have a clue about crime fighting, but he's so smart he can just predict everything. Sorry, I got so sarcastic, but that's who I am. And
well, that's how you're dealing with. I mean, you spend a lot of time, Bill, focusing on this case. It's an important one, and it's rattled our country, I think, in many ways. It's something that many of us can relate to, the innocent murder of 4 college kids. And I know, I think I said it when I was on the podcast last time, this hit home with me. There's unfortunately a lot of terrible things that happen in this country. This hit home for me because I have 5 adult children. My youngest is a junior in college. We were just there for Parents Weekend in October. And, oh my gosh. I mean, I forgot the partying and how much these kids drink. It's unbelievable to me. I'm like, how are these kids even going to class on Monday? I'd still be hungover from 5 days later. I'd still be hungover. But I went to a college like that as well. And I lived with 7 young women in a house. And I'm telling you, there were many times, I've talked to my daughter about this, who went to school in Denver. There are many times our doors were not locked and there were people coming in and out because we had boyfriends and we had parties, and you didn't know who was dating who all the time, especially when you live with a lot of people. And so this hit home for so many of us. And, it's been difficult not to get wrapped up in, you know, the drama of it all, really, in some ways, because, you know, I'm interested in true crime, and this is a curious case to me. But at the same time, I love that you're doing this episode, because I think it's important to pay attention and to keep in our thoughts the family members, the friends of these 4 kids. It's easy to stay distracted with the drama, with the you know, the fantasticalism, that's not even a word, I know, of this case. But to take a minute also and to keep them in our hearts, and to remember these 4 beautiful kids is important. I wanted to say one other thing too about the parents, is that I think that when something like this happens, we need to pivot, and we don't want to. Nothing in us wants to. I mean, we could kick and scream, and I would want to stay in bed for months and months and not shower. I know it. I wouldn't want to function. And then there comes the, if Stacey Chapin has gone through this, you have to get up, because there are other kids who need you. There are other people who need you. You have to get up. You got to put on a shirt. You got to put on some pants, and you got to have a cup of coffee, go in the kitchen. And they may be looking for meaning, a new sense of meaning, and a new sense of purpose, because life has thrown them something they never wanted. They never wanted this. Who would? So what do? You're still alive. You're on this earth. We gotta continue to try and live. So that's where I think many of us go into a place of looking for what's my purpose now? How can I use this time I have on this earth to keep my son or my daughter, or, you know, in this case, my son and my daughter's memories alive? They were here. Don't forget that. They were here, and they existed, and their lives meant something. Their lives meant something.
Absolutely. You know, it's the old adage. I know it's a cliche, but it's the whole thing. Like, when you get knocked on your ass, you got to get back up, and that's the truth. And there's nothing
Right.
worse than what these people have gone through. But you can choose to stay down through maybe anesthetizing yourself with alcohol or drugs. But
Right.
if you want to live another day, you got to get up off that ground and realize that life is for the living, and it's still going to go on.
Right.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, tell us how much you like us, write nice comments to us, and a lot of times we like to respond back to your comments. Also, if you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel members. You see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube friends, family, subscribers, and they support us. And we truly, truly appreciate everything they do for us in supporting Police Off the Cuff, real crime, true crime, real crime, whatever you want to call it. And I just like to say, people always ask me, "Oh, Bill, why don't you do more like cop war stories?" And I said, well, because 74% or to 77% of our audience is women, and they don't like those. So frankly, I won't do what 77% of my audience doesn't like. And I know that that's not their favorite. They do love true crime, and they like a lot of the things we do. So that's the reason. And I loved doing cop war stories. I think they're great, but that's not what our audience wants to hear. And even doing a show like today, where we sort of focus on something that might not be as popular as the true crime, the real crime part of it, you know, the video, the digital evidence, the behavioral analysis, all of that stuff is what people tune in to true
Right.
crime and real crime about. However, every once in a while, you have to veer off to a different way and cover something that's important, maybe not as interesting, but important. Anna,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Because we're all going to grieve in some way. We're not getting through this life without grieving. We're going to lose someone close to us. And I don't think any of us is going to escape that. And, you know, I was thinking about Stacy Chapin after you reached out to me, and thinking about, you know, finding meaning and purpose in life. And I would never, none of us would ever want to have to be in their shoes. But I think what she's doing is she's looking to heal. And this is her way. Like Steve Gonsalves may be looking to heal. And this is how we find our way to move into on that new path of life, is healing. And I wanted to say one other thing, Bill, too, before I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this today, talking about grief, is that everybody grieves differently. And many of you who are listening and will be listening may know of the name Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's a psychiatrist who wrote the book on the 5 stages of grief and in death and dying. You know, denial, shock, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and resolve. One thing I want to say, some of the theories about those stages of grief have been debunked, and that we know that grief is not linear. So for any of you who've ever lost somebody close to you, know that how you deal with your sorrow and how you cope, there's nothing wrong with it. And so don't let anybody tell you that it's enough now. You need to move on. You need to get out there and start dating again. It's enough now. Or you could have another child. I mean, come on. I've heard that. I've heard that actually several times in my practice over the years. And I have, you know, and for many people who look like they're doing okay, you can say something, and that's something we could also talk about too, when we're the friend of or the family member of. You can say something that can completely rip a scab open that the griever thought was healed. So I think that, number one, know that grief is not linear. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You may be having a good year, and then years later, you're like an open, exposed wound again, and that's okay. There's no normal here. Some people call it the new normal. I know of clients who told me they hate that term, but there's no normal. How you deal is how you deal, and that's really important for everybody listening to know and to understand. And if you are the family member, the friend of, the supporter of, if you want to know how you can help them and love them, ask them how they're doing today. How are you today? Get real concrete with them, not abstract. Don't make comments about you can always have another. No. Don't say those things. Talk about how are you today? What did you get done today? What's on your agenda for today? Do you have plans this weekend? Many people who've gone through this, they want that normalcy back in their life of the everyday. Hey, have you seen this so movie? You know, what have you been watching on Netflix? And they may be like, no, nothing. I'm not watching anything. But that's what might be wanted. And if you don't know, ask them, what do you need right now? How can I help you? And if you don't want to do that, Google things to ask friends who've experienced the loss of a child or a spouse or a parent or a cousin or a sibling. Okay, so I think that there's all kinds of resources out there for all of us. There's books that we can read when we are grieving. There's books that we can read when we want to be the supporter or the loved one of someone who's grieving. So there's resources, but I think number one is this is not linear. This is not a one-way process. You can be in acceptance one day, and then 3 months later, wake up. You can't get your feet on the floor off your bed, and you're staying in bed in a cocoon because you are in so much grief. And then next week, you can just be so angry and pissed off. And then the next day, you're like, I'm good. I'm okay. It's an okay day today.
Right.
So I wanted to say that.
Well, I think you said it very well. And I think one of the things that all of us want to know, and I don't think there is a real answer to this, but when you are supporting someone that's lost someone, what to say. And sometimes nothing is the best thing to say.
Right.
Just say, I'm sorry for your loss. And that's enough. And your
Yes.
presence there will say everything, you know.
Absolutely.
And trying to say something profound, or it's not going to work. It's going to come out badly. So you're better off to say as few words as possible. And I said your presence will help the person heal. And I think that I think we've all been on the side of the person that's trying to comfort someone and on the side of the person who lost someone.
Yeah.
And we know how each thing feels. And being someone that is going to, say, a wake or a funeral, you feel very awkward because there is nothing you can say that's going to make anything better. But again, your presence, I think, is totally what's needed and what's appreciated.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
Let me play a little bit more of this here. Let's
indicate the pursuit of legal action against the city within the next 2 years. Kaylee's father, Steve Gonzalez, seeks clarity on the state's intention to seek the death penalty.
We can't sit here and say, "Oh, if there was 5 victims, or 6 victims, or 7 victims, then you go for the death penalty." No, it's been crossed. The line's been crossed, and we're going to go there.
So emotions are running high as a trial approaches. Both the victims and the families and the greater Moscow community, they want nothing more than justice for their lost loved ones. Attorney Shannon Gray, representing the Gonzalez family, joins us to discuss. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Can you kind of provide us with an update? We know Brian Kohberger was in court this week.
I just wanted to show that a little bit to show the anger and you know how people process things different. Again, I compare Steve Gonzalez, and in no way criticizing him, because I said I am the Steve Gonzalez personality. And there's many people that, no matter how horrific this case is, there's people that are anti-death penalty. They feel that the state shouldn't give that as a penalty, death. And but tell that to a father that just lost his daughter in the most horrific way, that you're anti-death penalty. Him and his wife, clearly, they're pro-death penalty, and they have Christy Gonzalez is the name of his wife, so it's Steve and Christy. They voiced their opinions on many broadcasts that they want him to get the death penalty if found guilty. And all of that, we can argue, is a way of healing and a way to get through this whole thing. Right. And they're not going to be able to heal or become or to move on with their lives until this trial is over. And in a way, the death penalty prolongs things, because if he does get it, it could be 20 or 30 years of appeals. So it's almost as if life with no chance of parole is maybe a better punishment, because it puts a finality on the case. And you don't have to be every time, oh, there's another appeal. Oh, his penalty was there was a stay. It's put off, and that's what happens when they do go for the death penalty. And it makes everything a lot more complicated.
I have no idea what it's like to be in their shoes. I have no idea what it's like to be in their shoes. So, I hear what you're saying about the death penalty, that, I don't have strong opinions either way. I think that if that was my daughter, I'd be like, oh yeah. I don't think any of us could judge if you're pro or you're against what it's like to walk a mile in that man's shoes and Steve and Christy's shoes.
No, I think that, you can intellectualize things like this. And but the raw emotion of losing someone in this way, we would also, this doesn't have much to do with what I'm going to say, but we used to say that the definition of a conservative is a liberal that just got mugged, and that was so to make a sort of a comparison to this, is that you don't know how you'll become. You may be ideologically against it, but if it happens to you, and I've seen that to a lot of people that believe politically one way and something horrific happened to them and they were like, death penalty,
Absolutely.
Like, wow.
I've seen that too. Yeah, I've seen that politically growing up outside of Washington, D.C., being close to people that I've known over the years on the Hill. It's quite different when it happens to your child or it's your family member. Then all of a sudden the voting is, I'm going to cross the aisle. It's very true, Bill.
Yeah. So, and I find it humorous sometimes. I've seen that a lot. Although then I've seen people that didn't change. I remember there was a woman one time got robbed on the street by these two guys, and they knocked her on her ass and snatched a purse. And we were right there. We grabbed both of them, and she started screaming at us to read them their rights, and she wanted to ride in the unmarked car back to the precinct with the perps because she was afraid we would abuse them.
Wow.
I was like, something, lady, I should just let them go. Let them go in your neighborhood. Give them your purse.
Wow.
But
Wow.
you meet all kinds, and I always remember
you do.
those things.
Yeah.
It's almost like as a cop, sometimes you feel you have no friends on either side of the fence,
My gosh. Yeah, it's a tough job that you have had, that's for sure.
Yeah, but
I don't think
I
don't think anybody's arguing that.
No, I mean, I really don't feel that way, but there's now I look at things like that as funny, some funny stories I can tell,
Right.
and you look at it's just you draw upon things that maybe made you who you are after all these years, and some of the things you can laugh at now. But here's another little file tape of the Chapin family, and I'm just going to play a little bit more of this, and then we'll start to wrap.
Here, Stace and I get up and watch the sunrise and drink our coffee and cry in your coffee.
Ethan's parents, Jim and Stacy, speaking out for the first time.
I love to hug him. I'd give anything to just be able to hug him.
You just always make
one
sure
more time.
you just always hug your kid.
Ethan, the eldest of triplets, so full of joy. He spent his last day on this earth with his siblings. The three seen here at his sister Maisie's sorority formal before spending time with Xana at his Sigma Chi fraternity and then Xana's home at 1122 King Street, where they were murdered just hours later. That house set to be demolished.
You think stuff like that never happens.
You do. You think it happens to other people. But I'm telling you, if it can happen to us, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Both Maisie and Hunter are now back at school, preparing to graduate without their brother.
Hunter, he was kind of Ethan's wingman.
I mean, you realize when you're a triplet, you have spent your whole life together, the three of them.
Stacy and Jim lean on each other in what they're calling a shuttersome year of firsts, doing things they've always done, but for the first time without Ethan, preparing for milestones.
The one we have coming up first, 21st birthday.
That's going to be
We
tough.
have talked about the kids' 21st birthday forever.
We have.
That's going to be tricky.
Yeah, that is going to be a tricky time.
Yep.
Here at Tulip Valley Farms, Ethan worked in the fields planting bulbs, and now he's being remembered with his own.
Ethan's smile.
There have been right now 80,000 bulbs sold.
The Chapins have big intentions to give back to both their communities in Skagit Valley, Washington, where Ethan grew up, and Moscow, Idaho, with scholarships funded by proceeds from the Ethan Smile Foundation.
We've created something that is good, that Ethan would love. He loved people, he loved a great adventure, and he was inclusive. If we could touch as many lives as he touched in 20 years in our lifetime, the world would be a better place.
Well, pretty amazing family, and I can't think of a better note to end this on. I think if there is any, let me just remove this. If there's anything that we want to impart about today's show, is that we want these four kids remembered, and not to buy into the sensationalism. There's four people that lost their lives. This was a quadruple murder. Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves. And we always want to keep their names at the forefront of this, and not, fall into this whole, oh my God, let's FBI agent so-and-so says this, says that, and that's not what's important. The people that we're showing on the screen, those are the important people right there, these four people. And if this was anything today, it was maybe a tribute to them. And I want to thank Anna Markelin You guys can see her on the Badass Confidence Coach podcast. Actually, listen to her on the Badass Confidence Coach podcast. This is her second time on the show. I think she's done fantastic. Anna, final words.
If you're a praying person, say a prayer for all these families tonight. And if you're not, just send positive vibes out to the universe for these families because they need it. They need it. And for anybody that you know is grieving, reach out to them. Pick up the phone. How you doing? Want to get a cup of coffee? Think about those people in your community that you can reach out to. If, you know, let's send good vibes and prayers out to these families, but think about the people close to you. Is it a neighbor? Is there a cousin? There's someone who's grieving. And maybe it's been 6 months. Maybe it's been a few years. Maybe reach out and say, what's going on? How you doing? Just thinking about you. That means the world to people because what we know is that after 2 years, there's something about that 2-year mark. People seem to forget that we may be still dealing with the loss of our dad or that baby that died 30 years ago. We never forget those we love. And it means so much to us when someone reaches out and says, hey, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you today. I'm thinking about, you know, that baby. How you doing? Let's pay it forward to each other.
Very well said, Anna. And Anna, if I don't get a chance to, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
With about 2 hours notice, she was ready to go, and I really appreciate that. She didn't have much chance to prep, and you can see she's a real pro. But folks, thank you so much for tuning in today to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.